what compounds can we take that enhances and preserves neurogenesis? I know many, many people who would not dare take a psilocybin mushroom trip. But the concept of them taking 1/50th of a dose, something like that, and it causes neurogenesis that might make them smarter and a better mood or happier, that's a whole different subject.
We are on a never-ending search for partners. Life-affirming relationships. Or at the very least, nourishment for the next leg of our journey. We have flourished side by side with your species, symbiotically, for centuries.
Many shamanic cultures relied on mushrooms for their transcendental experiences. This is pre-religion all over the world. It was all about the individual's connection to the spiritual world, or the mystery. That is our context for living.
These are ancient artifacts from the Mayan culture. These are called mushroom stones. This may be the largest collection of mushroom stones in the world. The Mayan culture was very mycophilic, and they revered mushroom stones for divination, for spirituality, also to be able to predict incoming armies and how to strategize against them. A great ethnomycologist by the name of R. Gordon Wasson came up with the phrase mycophilia, the love of mushrooms the Mayans shared. You know, these mushrooms can get you high, they can heal you, they can feed you, they can kill you. And so that which is so powerful is naturally feared.
Wasson was an amateur mycologist, a person who studies mushrooms, and was invited to participate in a ceremony by a curandera, Maria Sabina, in 1955. He took these mushrooms and had a psychedelic experience.
And when R. Gordon Wasson came out with his research that was published in Life magazine in 1957, that was basically a field guide to psilocybin mushrooms delivered to tens of millions of Americans on their doorstep during the peak of the Cold War. This then was quickly noticed by academics at Harvard and other Ivy League schools, and then the cognoscente, including Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, and Dr. Andrew Weil.
Why do mushrooms produce molecules that fit receptors in the human brain and body? What does that say? What does that mean? I mean, does that mean that we're supposed to be using these things?
Psychedelics during the 50s and 60s were the cutting edge of psychiatric research. There were remarkable studies with very, very promising findings.
Psychedelics became part of research in psychiatry for 30 years, and there were several very interesting indications that they were researched. The best data was actually for alcoholism.
We found that having a mystical experience during the course of one session was the strongest predictor of positive outcome, meaning maintaining sobriety over the long follow-up period. It was very impressive.
Some of these drugs, you know, they had escaped the lab, as the phrase goes. Millions of people were using them, and you have to realize that this was a radical force unleashed in the West.
The kids who take psychedelics aren't going to fight your wars. They're not going to join your corporations. They won't buy it.
A lot was going on back in the 60s. There was a time of rapid cultural change. There was irrational fears about too much cultural change too fast. President Nixon called Timothy Leary the most dangerous man in America.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
When everyone says shrooms to me and invokes this whole idea of using psilocybin mushrooms as a party drug, they are so much more important than just getting high.
The movement to marginalize the major psychedelics is incredibly complex. I mean, it plugged into a counterculture movement, an anti-war movement, an anti-establishment movement. But there are many, many forces that were at play.
Somehow the fuse blew, and one of the victims was the medical research with psychedelics. There's a very irrational and anti-scientific climate that was fueled even in government pamphlets, really had distorted information that was not scientifically accurate.
And the bad trip, instant insanity.
The research came to a halt in 1970. War was declared on drugs. The Controlled Substances Act was passed. And the research essentially was erased from being taught in psychiatry.
I think I may have the dubious distinction of being the last to give psilocybin to a cancer patient at the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center. And then the research became completely dormant. In our evolution as a species, we're at a point of coming to terms with a major paradigm change. A change in how we view what we call reality. And that always evokes tension and fears. The culture wants to cling to the old view of the universe.
You realize that you've been limited all this time with your perspective of reality. Had reality been known to you at this level early on, how much more evolved would we be as beings? A lot of people would be afraid of that. So this is very dangerous territory. People want to give up the responsibility of being able to understand. And because they can't understand, then they have faith. And they put their faith in other people who say they can understand. And I think it's a situation that's ripe for a predatory relationship.
Anyone who's had one of those experiences in a country where it's not legal to have them is stuck in this position where something really precious and really giving a great gift to you is not understood by the culture at large, and furthermore puts you or other people and other people at risk of prosecution. And one response to that is to get angry and to want to fight that. And another response to it is to say, we just got to explain to people what's going on here. And when people understand it, then there will be accommodation and respect. There are a number of elders living in the Bay Area who've devoted some part of their career in psychology or religious studies who ended up being invited to a small invitational conference at Esalen called the Pacific Symposium on Psychedelic Drugs. As we went around the room making introductions, most of the people who were clinicians were excitedly talking about what kind of clinical trial they would run if they could use one of these substances to treat PTSD or to treat depression.
We wrote the best design we could. We submitted it to the FDA, and they approved it. This was 1999, and it reactivated psychedelic research after basically a 22-year dormancy in the United States.
It's like a Rip Van Winkle effect, you know? It's waking up 20 years later, the methodologies, the questions that we can ask on so many different levels.
I've been diagnosed with prostate cancer. My diagnosis was so bad that it was, they weren't giving me any chance whatsoever.
My diagnosis was kidney cancer.
I first found out about the study when my oncologist gave me a pamphlet. He said, here's something that might be able to help you with the anxiety. And I was accepted into the study.
The most important thing is to remember that you're always safe. And a recommendation is that whatever is coming up, that you allow it, that you don't have to like it, but you say, okay, rather than trying to run away from it. Once a volunteer is enrolled in the study, they're with us for the preparation, the psilocybin sessions, and the integration follow-ups after. I have been a guide for around 350 psilocybin sessions, and then about 1,000 of the preparatory and integration meetings.
All right.
Okay. Okay, let me tear that up. It's really just about experiencing what comes up as the psilocybin takes effect.
And the intense part of this journey, this world and things that matter to most people, family and all that, that wasn't even what it was about. They say anything mystical can't be explained. It's something like that. It's a feeling of such immense power that you can't even imagine. I've never felt anything like it before. It was about being in a place of infinite space and just being there.
There's an experience of positive mood, sometimes open-heartedness, love, transcendence of time and space, and then finally it's thought to be ineffable. People say, I can't describe that experience.
In my mind, I said, okay, hold it. If I give myself over to you, can you promise me that I will be in at least as strong a shape as when I entered this room? And I felt a voice that I needed to heed. Do you think I would disrespect my own handiwork? This is the voice from on high saying, do you think I would disrespect my child? And I felt so beautiful. I felt like I have never felt before. My sense of being loved, of being worthy of love, of being cared for, of being important to someone. It's huge.
Keep going into it. Doing beautifully.
One-third of individuals in the study said it's the single most spiritually significant experience of their lives. About 70% say it's among the 5 most personally meaningful experiences of their lives. And you say, well, so what does that mean? You know, and initially I thought, I wonder if they don't have pretty dull lives. But no, people would say, you know, when my firstborn came into this world, I'll never forget that. And life has never been the same since. Or my father passed away. That was deeply moving to me. I'm different now in the world. And so, you know, it's kind of like that.
The most glorious part was that it made me feel more comfortable with living, you know, because you're not afraid of dying.
Frankly, I'm just a laboratory scientist. And I wasn't prepared for that.
From the memory of the transcendental state of consciousness, many people report less anxiety, less depression, less preoccupation with pain, closer interpersonal relationships, and perhaps most impressive, they claim to have a loss of the fear of death.
It recalibrates how they see death. It's been amazing hearing them talk about this idea of love. Many of them spoke about how nature itself is something like this substance called love. And having touched that, they've recalibrated it and shaped how they die differently.
The Johns Hopkins psilocybin research team has completed or has underway a total of 9 studies, and it got the world's attention. When we finally released the results of our first experiment in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, it was very gratifying to see how the daily press responded to it.
A little bit of health news for you. A single dose of psychedelic magic mushrooms can make people with severe anxiety and depression feel better for months.
It changes the way they view themselves, other people in the world, from a single experience, not Prozac that you have to keep taking day after day.
These are not chronic drugs. And that's where most of the research and development in big pharma goes. The treatments that are being explored for psilocybin involve 1, 2, maybe 3 pills. That's it. That's not a very good business model. You can't make a lot of money that way.
The core of this mystical experience is a mystery, frankly. It's the existential mystery of what are we really doing here? What's the meaning of all this? And that is a very uplifting kind of experience to have.
As a whole, there's a sense of being part of a larger network. And somehow that's more real after a mystical experience. You feel that you really are connected in some meaningful way with every atom of the universe.
From my perspective, this core experience then forms all of the religious, ethical, and moral traditions. I mean, that is the core of love thy neighbor as thyself. If we don't get some of these priorities straight with respect to how we treat other people, how we treat our environment, we're going to cease to exist. I could see this as being critical to the evolution of the species, frankly.
You wouldn't go hiking in the Himalaya mountains without any preparation. Well, this is a journey. These are sacraments and medicines that should be treated with respect and caution. Consider it to be going to your own personal church. You're going to sit in awe of the universe.